Why every African female should vote. Susan B. Anthony clearly spoke. It was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, not we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people who formed the Union. I remember when my mother would go to vote, she was denied her voting rights. But yet my father, he was allowed to go vote because he was a male. And we as children, we were taken to this polling place, and we were used as little runners. If the whites would vote, they would get money. If the blacks would come to vote, they would be offered either beer or some form of liquor. We as little black African American children, that was our job during the elections proceedings in a small town that I was raised in. So that's why I always say every black or every African American lady should vote. A woman should have every right enjoyed by man to the full extent of what can and cannot be done. The woman should have the same powers as we are, subjected to the same earth. We all must coexist together. Shirley Chisholm, a politician and an educator, once said, "You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and whining and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideals." Having the right to vote as a woman and having the right to vote as an African American woman is a privilege. From the first time that I could vote, I have continuously exercised that right to vote. 41 years of voting is one of my equal rights. The first gathering devoted to women's rights in the United States was held on July 19th through the 20th, 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York. A group of women launched a gathering on a national level organized by Elizabeth Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, well-renowned reformer and activist. I'm going to speak about Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony was a social reformer, and of course she was a women's rights activist, and she played a very pivotal role in the women's suffrage movement. In an article, The Beginning of the Women's Suffrage Movement, Susan B. Anthony intentionally tested the law in 1872 by voting for Ulysses S. Grant, a Republican congressman. She was then later arrested and convicted of illegal voting. Susan B. Anthony was also inspired in 1875 to draft what was to become the 19th Amendment, also known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, after a 70-year battle, which was amended for all women to vote. Yet, the women in the South was still not allowed. The African American women were not allowed to vote. At the time the U.S. was founded, its female citizens did not share all the same rights as men, including the right to vote. So on August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified. American women now had the right to vote, including African American women, except still in the South. This is why it was called the women's suffrage right. Stanton, Martin, and Anthony and other activists formed organizations that raised awareness and lobbied the government to grant voting rights. The demand for the vote became a centerpiece of the women's rights movement. So with the outrage in Selma, Alabama still fresh on the minds of the country, on August 6, 1965, a day of triumph, for freedom as huge as any victory that has been ever won on any battlefield, said President Lyndon B. Johnson in an article titled Voting Rights. The Voting Rights of 1965 was passed. This act abolished literacy tests, poll taxes, no longer having to recite the Constitution of the United States, and even questions of no longer needing to explain the most complex provision of state laws to vote. African American ladies had to go through all of that. I mean, it seemed like it was a disheartening episode in their lives. So why should you vote? It gives us women power. And it's important. Even if your candidate do not win, you still should continue to use your rights to vote. And it also decides who will represent you. And many campaigns, movements have been given to give you that right to vote. Celia Darrow, a famous author, asked 30 women why they're voting in an article on November 7th, 2016. The women explained why they were voting and why they should vote. So I will have 4 quotes from 4 ladies of why they decided to vote. The first one was Feminista Jones. As people who were once doubly disenfranchised from voting by both a woman and black, I think we exhibit a unique commitment to voting as citizens. Second one is Karen Hunter. I vote because my grandmother, Julia Sweeper, couldn't. She was born in the 1920s in Augusta, Georgia, where her second-class citizenship was on full display. The third one, Terry Washington, said the reason why she votes is that one of the interesting things about the election is that I haven't heard of any candidates talk to black women in terms of our strengths and our power. I have heard generalizations in terms of our grief and our struggle, but not to our resilience and our ability to create. Number 4, Joelle N. Johnson gave this reason for voting. Black women have a choice. Others have been trying to suppress for centuries. Whether we're considered angry or outspoken, it doesn't matter. Our voices will be heard. The most important advice to women, especially African American women, is to use your voting rights. Use our voting rights. Go and register to vote. Vote in local elections, city elections, primary elections, presidential elections. Having the right to vote as a woman and as an African American woman is a privilege. It has taken 70 years from the first movement of women's suffrage to obtain the right to vote, and then another 45 years for African women in every state to be allowed to vote. Go out, exercise your right to vote. Many people have died in marches and protests so that we can finally have the right. Use it. Don't abuse it. It's our right.